reserve the right to object, and I'm going to explain my concerns. And let me start by quoting George W. Bush. George W. Bush said, "Free markets are not a jungle in which only the unscrupulous survive, or a financial free-for-all guided only by greed." Then he continued, "Tricking an investor into taking a risk is theft by another name." What we're in the process of considering is taking a House bill related to the production of capital for small and emerging businesses and considering it on the floor of this Senate without due process by a Senate Banking Committee. Now, we need that process because the House bill is full of problems for investors that will create a marketplace where investors can be deeply damaged. It is our responsibility in this body to make sure that as we produce a streamlined system for small companies and startup companies to access capital, we don't create basically a scheme for pump and dump operators seeking to defraud American citizens. That's why we need due consideration in committee. Now, I can't speak to the challenges with all the portions of the House bill, but I can speak to a specific section of the House bill called crowdfunding, because I've been working with others, including the distinguished presiding senator, Senator Bennett from Colorado, and Scott Brown from Massachusetts, to say, let's utilize this crowdfunding tool, but do it in an effective manner. Now, what is crowdfunding? Crowdfunding is saying, let's take the power of the internet. Just as we have person-to-person lending facilitated by the internet, let's take the power of the internet, enable people who see small startup companies that are seeking capital investments, and give them a chance to present their ideas and for folks to invest in those companies. So they might receive thousands of small investments, enabling them to take their dream forward to the benefit of the investor and to the benefit of the company. But what is wrong with the way that the House drafted this? I'm going to give short examples. It enables companies to raise up to $1 million by providing no financial information. No financial information. That is not an investment market. That is a scam. Second, companies do not have to go through a registered intermediary. So in other words, you or I tomorrow could start up a website and say companies sign up and investors sign up with no sorts of protocols for the registering of information and no system required for the protections of investors. So that is a major mistake in this legislation. Third, under the House bill, a person could say, hey, here are 10 stocks, 10 potential companies to put your money into, and through that action could take 100% of your income, your annual income, in one fell swoop. So as we create this particularly interesting marketplace full of potential, we don't want it to be a place where no financial information occurs, no rules for the intermediaries, and people can be taken for their whole annual income in one fell glance. That is no way to build this wonderful potential marketplace. To continue, the House bill lacks any advance public notice. So a company can provide to the SEC notice on the same day they offer their stock, and upon getting 60% of the amount they are seeking, of their target amount, they can walk away with the investor's cash like that. So in other words, offer it, no chance for the SEC to take a look at it, collect your $1 million, walk away, you didn't provide 1 ounce of financial information. Folks, if you haven't seen the movie The Boiler Room, I encourage you to do so, because you will see how scams, actually not permitted by law, were used to defraud earnest American families. In this case, we're just paving the path to predatory investing schemes. So that is a problem. The House bill allows anonymous stock promoters so that it encourages the opportunity for pump and dump, which is a reference to anonymous promoters saying how wonderful something is and not identifying themselves as having a connection to the company that's offering its stock. It does not address the issue of dilution. You know, if you had a chance to get on the start of Starbucks, someone said, I'm going to start up a coffee company, and wouldn't it be great for you being on the ground floor? And you said, oh, you bet, and you get 1% of Starbucks stock as a result. Well, you'd be very rich today. But what about a company that proceeds to use a strategy of diluting the original investors so that your initial investment in this startup is worth nothing when the company actually gets traction as a successful entity? Well, that's certainly an issue. These issues have all been wrestled with and addressed by the bill that Senator Bennett, Senator Brown, and myself have put together. Now, the other sections of the House bill have similar problems. I won't speak to those problems because there's other folks who are much more knowledgeable about it. So I'll stick to my section and use it as an analogy of why this entire bill should go through the Banking Committee. Let me read to you a letter from Matavi. Their slogan is investment for everyone. Isn't that the perfect slogan for crowdfunding? Investment for everyone. They address their letter, Dear Senators Reid and McConnell, we are a crowdfunding intermediary based in Durham, North Carolina, and we understand the Senate will take up the House bill shortly. We are very concerned about language in Title III. While we appreciate the broad exemption written by the House, the language does not protect investors and puts the crowdfunding industry at risk of significant fraud. However, more responsible language does exist, and that it refers to the bill that the Senate has been working on. And then they proceed to list many of the flaws that I just listed. So here are folks out in the private sector who want to see a very successful process. They want to be an intermediary. They don't want to see this potential industry brought to a halt with a terrible reputation because it becomes a predatory industry. I have another letter here from Launched, and that's Launch with a T on the end. This latest bill, the Crowdfund Act, that's the Senate version, is important because unlike previous bills, for the first time, we have a Senate bill with bipartisan sponsorship, a balance of state oversight and federal uniformity, industry standard investor protections, workable funding caps. It lays out why this work should be in this bill. And finally, I want to note the perspective in the New York Times editorial. It's titled, They Have Very Short Memories. And it's scathing in its critique of the process we're engaged in. House Republicans, Senate Democrats, and President Obama have found something they support, a terrible package of bills that would undo essential investor protections, reduce market transparency, and distort the efficient allocation of capital. They go on, of course, the supporters don't describe it that way. They say the Jobs Act, which is the name of the House capital formation bill, would remove burdensome regulations that they claim have made it too difficult for companies to raise money from investors. Never mind that reams of congressional testimony, market analysis, and academic research have shown that regulation has not been an impediment for raising capital. In fact, it's too little regulation that has been in the root of all recent bubbles and bursts. The dot-com crash, Enron, the mortgage meltdown, those free-for-alls created jobs and then imploded, causing mass joblessness. Wouldn't it have been great if when those deregulatory efforts that didn't deregulate in a positive way, cutting out unnecessary red tape, but in negative ways, which created a Wild West marketplace with all kinds of predatory practices, wouldn't it be nice if the Senate had stood in at that moment and said, we are the cooling saucer? I've heard that term ever since I came to the Senate. We're the cooling saucer. Well, we cooled our heels for 3 weeks without the transportation bill on this floor, and we weren't able to consider one single transportation amendment during that 3-week period. That wasn't cooling saucer, that was deep freeze. But now we've gone from deep freeze to bullet train. We need to slow this train down. We need to have due deliberation so we create the sort of deregulation that is so important for a future growth of the United States of America and the future success of American families. I'm going to withdraw my objection, Mr. President, because I wanted to make a point now that hopefully will help guide our deliberations over the next couple of days. It's not that we shouldn't be getting to this topic. We certainly should. But we need to do so in a manner that works for American businesses, small businesses, startups, and families, and the House bill doesn't do it. Thank you, Mr. President. I withdraw my objection.